Welcome, listeners. This is Sebastian Nothwell interviewing Luna Daye
Hi.
and Sarah Wallace.
Hello.
Luna and Sarah are here to talk about newsletters.
Yay!
Something every author has been told they need. Now, what prompted you to create a newsletter?
It was literally like you said. Everyone said, you need to have one. If you're going to make it as an author, you need to have a newsletter. But honestly, I'm the worst person at sending out newsletters. So yeah, I have one, but I don't utilize it as much as I really should.
Was there anything in particular that pushed you over the edge to start it? Or was it just one too many people telling you?
Well, at the beginning, when I was really researching being an indie author, it was one of the big things, you've got to get, how are you going to reach people, if your social media goes down, or, you're relying on an algorithm for people to see, your posts when you've got, a new release or something. And I was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But actually doing the newsletters takes quite a lot of effort and energy. And it fell off the bandwagon completely after a few months. So, but yeah, it really was just, everyone said you had to have one right at the beginning. So I really focused on trying to get one, and then I might have forgotten about it a little bit.
Same as far as the reason I had been told all of the things. You need to have it because social media is basically borrowed real estate and it could close at any time, so you shouldn't depend on it. What kind of pushed me to actually start doing it was I was following, I discovered Golden Angel on TikTok.
Yeah, she's great.
She's so good, and she gives really, really helpful information, and kind of TikTok is helpful for the bite-sized chunks, which Golden Angel uses that very, very well, I think. And I went through a little brief moment where I was catching up on all of her videos on indie author advice, because she gave some really, really good indie author advice. And one of the things that she said that really stuck with me was that you're going to, when you're becoming an indie author, you're going to get lambasted with a whole bunch of feedback. And a lot of it's going to be really good advice. But if you're getting overwhelmed, focus on doing one new thing every year so that you're not trying to do all of the things. I don't really follow that advice because I still do a lot of the things, but it does help me to prioritize. I don't have to do everything, just focus on a couple of things that I want to do each year.
I was going to say, I absolutely fail at that advice.
I do too.
Yeah, right. Who does that?
My first year, I released the debut author, I did a newsletter, I did a website, I did a whole bunch of new things my first year, but it helps me to keep, it's okay that I don't have translated books right now. It's okay that I don't have, all of the stuff, because I'm focusing on a different new thing each year. And in that advice bundle, she also said, if you do one new thing this year, make it a newsletter, because that's the first thing you should do as an author, is have a newsletter. Even before your book is released, you should have a newsletter, which I didn't do that.
I have followed none of her advice. Oh my god.
Yeah. Same, really, but it was still good advice, even if I didn't follow it.
I think I had mine going before the launch of my first book. And I probably kept it going for about a year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then I think the last one I sent was maybe September, October time, something like that, my last release. But yeah.
Which goes very nicely into our next question, which is, how frequently do you send your newsletter?
I have it on a schedule of on the 15th of the month, every month. I try to keep it monthly, even if I don't have news. And I have a little spreadsheet of things I can put in between releases. So yeah, so I do it monthly on the 15th of every month. I've made a couple of changes occasionally if I have a random sale going on that I want to make sure, that happens between newsletters. I'll send that out in a kind of a one-off. And I did recently do an early release of my newsletter because I needed to send the cover reveal before my social media post. And I kind of flubbed it on the uploading, so I had to send it a little earlier, or else newsletter subscribers weren't getting the first look at the cover reveal, which is what I promised them. So I had to send it 2 weeks early, and I did a poll on Instagram, do you guys care? And everyone's really couldn't give a shit when you send out the newsletter, so I just sent it, and I was like, okay, great. So the 15th of the month is really for me, because no one actually notices when I sent it, so.
That's so organized. I'm in awe right now. I'm like, wow, spreadsheet and everything.
I mean, I should clarify, the spreadsheet is about 2 columns long, but it's,
Hey, a spreadsheet's a spreadsheet. You can have one column in there and it still counts.
That's right. So it's got a little list of the month and year usually. That's column A. And then column B is what the, for lack of a better word, the bonus content is going to be. It's not always bonus content, but I try to give my newsletter subscribers one thing in the newsletter every time, other than news.
Mm-hmm.
So typically that's the big stuff, cover reveals. Or if I have a book coming out, I give the subscribers like the first look at the book so they get the first chapter for free the month before the book is released. And then when I have like in between months, like when I don't have those sorts of big things, I try to do like, oh, here's art that I got commissioned, or here's like a little short scene I wrote for these characters. Here's a scene that I already wrote, but rewrote it in a new point of view. Here's that. So I've been doing that a little bit. At this current rate, I'm releasing 3 books a year, so I do have quite a bit of regular cover reveals, and here's meet the characters first, and here's the free chapter. So that takes up the bulk of the year, but then I have the little short scenes kind of on retainer for when I need them.
Absolutely love that. That's awesome. I think monthly is like the sweet spot for newsletters. I think any more than that, unless you've got something really big going on.
Yeah.
Release month or something like that, or like you said, if it's like a giveaway or a free month or something like that, then yeah, monthly's like a good standard, I think.
Yeah, I think so too.
I don't send out a newsletter myself, but I do receive several.
Mm.
And one of the authors I receive a newsletter from is KJ Charles, because of course. And looking back through my email archive, she sends about 2 newsletters a year.
Oh, interesting.
And it's really only when she has a release. And I think this might be because she's KJ Charles and she doesn't really have to.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, the trend does seem to be like send newsletter when you have something to actually offer and don't just like weekly send something out just to be in someone's inbox.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Like there's an author that I follow and I signed up for the spicy art, you know how it is. And right?
Yep.
And like this author literally sends out the same email like every 3 or 4 weeks. They've got one book out, they're a debut author, and that's absolutely fine. But it's the same thing every month, and I'm like,
Oh, that's interesting.
yeah, I love your book, and I love their social media content, and, you know, I'm really looking forward to their next book, but every month it feels like you're just telling me the same thing every month, and I'm kind of like, I don't want to not be subscribed, but it does need to have something, like you said, it needs to have something in it each month, like some actual valid content, you know?
Yeah, and I was given advice to not do what I do, which is I try to give them like a freebie thing every month, and I was advised that that's a bad idea. I do it anyway because I trust that my subscribers know that they're not entitled to always getting free stuff from me, that I'm giving them free stuff because I want to. And like the advice I was given was like, oh, then readers are going to expect free stuff from you always. And I think that advice kind of places a lot of distrust on the readers to not be intelligent enough to know that they're not always going to get free stuff. Like, I think as a newsletter subscriber myself, when I get free stuff from authors I'm like, great, this is so cool. I love how generous they are. I don't think, you didn't give me a free thing this month. Where's my free thing? So I feel like I trust my readers to know that they're getting free stuff because I want to give it, not because that's how the world works. So I think that they recognize that. So I'm not super worried.
Yeah, and I think it doesn't even have to be anything free, but it just needs to be some new information. Like,
yeah.
Noah does his monthly, doesn't he? And he always like shares either something that one of his author friends are doing, or just like you said, a bit of new artwork, or like when they've got a new story coming along, or even if it's just a whip at the moment, like a work in progress, like this is something I'm working on, I'm not sure when it's coming, but this is what I'm working on. It's new information. It doesn't need to be always like a bonus chapter or a short story or anything like that. It's just new information rather than just like, hey guys, I'm still alive and I'm still working on this one book kind of thing. Like that gets a little repetitive.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But Noah's really good at doing something interesting every month. He sends out a newsletter.
Yeah, he has a good newsletter.
For more on Noah's newsletter, check out our episode interviewing Noah about his newsletter.
He's gonna be so embarrassed that I said that as well. Like, sorry, Noah, I love the newsletter. Just fangirling over here, don't mind me.
I'm a person who like really loves like having a stock format, and like MailerLite has this option where you can make a template or you can like use the previous newsletter you sent. And I've been taking advantage of like the previous newsletter I sent, and I just go through and clean out all of the individual details I sent in the previous month and just substitute it for new details. So it looks the same practically every month. It's just the information is always slightly different.
I love that.
Yeah, so that helps to cut down on time a little bit for me, so I'm not starting from scratch every month.
I'm going to be DMing you about that because I just use the basic Wix program for my emails.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm going to be asking you about that later.
I'm totally happy to help. Yeah, it's really been a game changer for me to be able to use the because I was using a template and then it got kind of quickly like I didn't like it because when I first started my newsletter, I had a whole bunch of little sections. Like I had a recipe for the month and I had a quote from my books every month and I had a question every month. And also I had like, here's what I'm working on right now and here's what's new in my life and here's what my author friends are. And so like I had all this stuff and I was running out of recipes. Like I'm not a recipe writer and like I stopped caring about making quotes every month because I'm like they read it, they don't need a quote every month. And like the questions was a recommendation of trying to get engagement and I have very little engagement from my newsletter, which is fine. Like engagement as in people responding to the email, not as in they click into links. But no one was responding to my questions and I was like, why am I trying to come up with a new question every month? No one cares. So using the template wound up being kind of obnoxious because I had to go through and delete all the stuff that I didn't feel like doing anymore. And then using the past month was better because then it was a little bit more up to date because it had like, last month's stuff. So I was tweaking some things. So like, this one book is no longer with my beta readers. It's now with my editor or with my audiobook narrators or whatever. So the format is much closer to what I actually need it to be.
I love that.
What mistakes should authors avoid in their newsletters?
I can only speak really as a reader, so as a receiver of the newsletters. And again, I think, like we've said already, like repetition of sort of stale information is probably a no-go because that's just going to turn off engagement. And then I have one newsletter that I'm subscribed to where the author writes it all in one big long, it's like a big chunk of text. And I don't know if it's just my ADHD brain being like, I can't download all of this information. Like it's like a chapter. It's like a full-on, like
wild.
It's a huge amount of information. And there's probably some really good little nuggets in there.
Are there at least paragraph breaks?
No, it's not even paragraph breaks.
Oh my god.
It's just a solid like a 5 or 6 scroll when you're doing it on your phone, like a 5 or 6
God.
scroll of information. And I got one the other day and I was just like, I just don't have the energy for this. So for me, I would say like breaking it up into like little paragraphs, maybe having a couple of graphics, just making it visually engaging as well as the content. The way that it actually looks aesthetically needs to be interesting because like that's going to catch attention for sure.
That sounds almost like it might be a formatting error. Like they think they've broken it up with stuff, but like something's getting crunched on the data end before it gets sent out and it's just going out as just a text wall.
Yeah. Later down the newsletter, it's fine. Like there's a, what I'm reading at the moment, what my author friends are doing.
Oh my
it's
gosh.
just that like author update thing. Like the first bit it's just like War and Peace. And I'm like, whoa, that's a lot. So I normally do just kind of scroll all the way to the bottom. I'm like, have we got any new releases, new artwork? Like what recommendations have you got going on? Okay, cool. Like I skip that big chunk because I think it needs to be sort of snippets, like little nuggets of information rather than a book.
Yeah, for sure.
Unless you're sending like the first chapter out, but then it should be clear that that's
that's what it is. Yes,
book content kind of thing. Yeah,
absolutely. I think the only mistake I can think of this isn't a mistake. This is really more of a personal preference. And like a resource that is helpful for me was Newsletter Ninja. And I will say this was helpful, except it also intimidated me personally because I feel like newsletters, when you use a site like MailerLite or MailChimp, it usually is pretty user-friendly, or it's not super, super complicated. Like there's a bit of a learning curve in figuring it out, but it's not as complicated as like reading it in a book makes it sound. So that was like a sort of mistake as I read a newsletter book before actually having a newsletter site ready to go because I was like, this is so much information. I don't know what I'm doing. And I got kind of scared about doing newsletters. And a bit of advice that the author had said was for newsletter magnets not to do the first chapter in the book. In your upcoming book, because that gets to be pretty quickly is no longer actually a draw once the book is out. And so they said that it should be something that is independent of anything else that you can keep forever, that you only have on that newsletter. So I have like a prequel short story, basically a novelette length short story that you can only get on the newsletter. And I've like considered trying to like put it into like a short story collection or something, but right now I kind of like that it's just on the newsletter. That's the only place you can get it. So that's what I have. And I do subscribe to a pretty big indie author who had like the first chapter as their newsletter magnet. And it was an interesting thing because I subscribed to the newsletter after I'd already read the book. And then I got the little like, here's your free story. And it was the first chapter. I'm like, Art, I already read this. Thanks. So it was, as somebody who had found them because of their book, I was already like, that was kind of a silly prize to get. I already have this, and I have the whole book. Like, what was that? So I wouldn't say it's a mistake, but I would advise steering clear of offering your first chapter as the reader magnet and do something that is like works on its own.
I like the novella, especially the prequel one. Like, I've definitely signed up for those before. A friend of mine did that. So she does a new one for each. She works in trilogies. So every time she does a new trilogy, as soon as she starts like talking about book one, you get the prequel novella in the newsletter for that trilogy, and it stays the magnet until that trilogy is complete. And then when she moves on to the next trilogy, it's the next novella. And actually now, so she's on her third trilogy now. The first two trilogies you can buy the novella, so it is actually available on like, you know, the place we don't talk about and her website. And so I actually own them now. Like, I can actually physically have them. But while that trilogy is, you know, being released, she is quite a quick release author, but as it's being released, you can only get it on the newsletter, but it updates with each trilogy. So I thought that's quite a cool idea.
That's a very smart idea.
Super smart.
I take a class from indie author Erin Wright, who gives lots of advice. And one of the things that she recommended is actually to have a reader magnet for every series that you publish.
Makes sense.
And that's what's killing me.
I know you have a lot of series. And I'm in the middle of starting like the Fae and Human Relations series with S. O'Callahan, and I have started the reader magnet for that series. It's not finished yet. It's partially written because I got partway through it and I was like, I don't know what happens next, because we know what happens next, but like I don't know what to do other than that. So I haven't finished it yet. But I need to get a wiggle on that before the book 2 is out. So yeah.
You'll figure it out. You got this.
We'll get there.
You'll spreadsheet it out.
Probably, actually.
Make a spreadsheet, you'll be fine.
Fine.
What is one thing you wished you'd known before you started your newsletter?
I wish I'd known about the spreadsheet.
We wish we'd talked to Sarah Wallace specifically.
Yeah, like, I wish I specifically had Sarah's spreadsheet. No, I think it's really a learning curve. I really think like the reader magnet is definitely something I didn't realize was a thing until I was a few months into sending a newsletter. And also, apparently I'm today years old when I found out about like pre-existing templates and stuff. I just thought every time I had to go in and make it from scratch. So
I wonder you were daunted by making them. Oh my goodness.
oh yeah, I've just been going in like starting from scratch every time. So yeah, like templates and spreadsheets. Like, I guess it's that sort of working smarter, not harder when it comes to newsletters and things, because it's really daunting for me doing them. So I think having the tools or discovering these tools nice and early in the newsletter career is probably helpful.
Yeah, I think for me, probably the working smarter, not harder is a really good one. I think too, for me, what put me off of newsletters for so long is that they sound really complicated and overwhelming. And I think I'd say the thing I wish I'd known before starting a newsletter is that it's actually not as scary as it sounds when you're going into stuff. And again, most of the sites like MailerLite is built for layman use. Like it's not built for people who are super knowledgeable about how to do like A/B testing. And you know, it's meant for people to off the street to be able to start a newsletter. So if you go into it with that in mind and like just like have the confidence in yourself that you can figure it out, because even the stuff that is slightly more complicated, it's not super complicated. But like when you're reading a book that's like, here's how to make sure you have the integration and then you have to have this, and I was like, what are these words? I don't know, I'm not a coder. And so I got all freaked out about it for like months and I didn't do it. And in the end, it was actually not as hard as I thought it would be. Like the hardest part is the setup. And once you have the setup, it basically runs pretty smoothly. So the thing I wish I'd known is to not be as scared about it.
Yeah.
So much more doable than it seems.
Yeah.
I tell myself every day I fail to send out a newsletter.
Sebastian, you can do this. I believe in you.
You can.
I will subscribe to your newsletter. I will walk you through the newsletter putting together if you want.
Thank you. I might just take you up on that.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much for coming on the podcast and offering your expertise about newsletters. And while we're here, where can people sign up for your newsletters?
Well, I wouldn't know about expertise, but you can sign up to my newsletter at my website, which is just lunaday.com.
Thank you so much for having us. You can sign up for my newsletter at sarahwallacewriter.com/contact.